maybe that driver is ill. The tolerant reaction, proceeds cautiously, allows driver a wide berth. Okay, maybe that driver is ill, just as common here in Albania and many countries. Maybe that driver is drunk. Here in Albania, they usually have signs on the car, but it also could be a beginning driver, a learning driver. It could also be someone who's talking on their phone while they're driving, or trying to text while they're driving. We've all seen these things. The tolerant reaction here then would be stay away from that driver because you could get in an accident with him or her. This is a dispositional attribution, says this guy's crazy, I need to teach him a lesson. And we have the unfavorable reaction, which is to speed up and race past the other driver and give him a dirty look, honk horn. It's not a terrible idea to get away from that driver, so speeding up and going past him is not a terrible idea. I'm a fairly good driver myself. If someone is a bad driver, it's a good idea to get away from them, either by slowing down or speeding up, as long as you can do it safely. So, continuing with social thinking, a couple more slides with this. Our behavior is affected by our inner attitudes as well as external social influences. So, what we believe interacts with what's going on around us, and this working together creates our behavior, and that may be a single response to a situation. It may be an ongoing period of, say, mood or reaction if you don't like working somewhere. I have a bad attitude about working at this place, and the people at work are generally not too happy with you either. Your behavior might be, for example, depressed. It could be aggressive. It could be many things, but it will be a combination of how you feel about something interacting with the external stimuli or the external influences of your workplace that creates your behavior. I have an example on here that we'll use. We'll use a positive one. Your internal attitude knows that voting is the right thing to do. We have an election tomorrow. Voting is the right thing to do. External influence, your friends want to go to Italy tonight. They want to take the ferry from Dures and go to Italy. So you won't be able to vote. The right thing to do is to stay here and vote. Your friends put pressure on you to go, and they tell you it doesn't matter, the election is decided, it's corrupt anyway. They put peer pressure on you. You ultimately make a decision based on what you know is right, along with the persuasive tactics or peer pressure of your friends, and you decide to stay or to go, depending on who you are, and I wouldn't judge you strongly either way. Of course, we all know a year ago we had an election here in Tirana that every vote counted. Social thinking continued. Cognitive dissonance theory. This is an expression I would know. You will see this again and again in the social sciences during your academic career. So I would write down a definition of what we mean by cognitive dissonance. We act to reduce the discomfort. Dissonance. Dissonance is something that comes from sound, the sounds that don't agree, but it's used in the social sciences to mean brain disagreement. So we act to reduce discomfort that we feel when two of our thoughts, cognitions, are inconsistent. So I believe voting is right. My friends tell me not to worry about it. These things make us uncomfortable. So, for example, when we become aware that our attitudes and actions clash, we can reduce the resulting dissonance by changing our attitudes. This is not really an example, that's explaining it better. The example was what I just gave you about voting. So, continuing with social thinking, this is, I think, out of order, this slide. Let's go to the next slide. This is cognitive dissonance. So Fiona's attitude or her belief is that tuition at her university is too expensive. Fiona's behavior is she's making graffiti here. Probably what we need to have also on here is that the school is cutting back, it's cutting programs, perhaps it's cutting her major. So this creates cognitive dissonance. She's aware that her attitude and behavior are inconsistent. She believes school is too expensive, yet the school doesn't have enough money. She resolves the dissonance by realizing that schools are very expensive things to run, and it's not just about the money that she pays. They need to have enough money to pay all the teachers, to pay for the electricity, to pay for the computers. All of the things that she expects to exist in a school need to be paid for, and she understands that. So in this way, she fixes her cognitive dissonance, which was that she's angry that my school is costing me so much money. So because these are out of order, let's go back one and talk about a little bit more about social thinking before we move on to social influence. Social thinking, we also think about the foot in the door phenomenon, the tendency for people who have first agreed to a small request to comply later with a larger request. This is how corruption works. If you get a policeman to accept a little bit of money to not give you a ticket for your bad driving offense, you're now the person in the red car. If you can get a policeman to do that, then later you can usually give that policeman more money to do something more extreme, like forget the fact that he saw you in your car hit another car, or maybe even hit a person, just by paying him, because you already know that he's a little bit corrupt. You couldn't have got him to do that the first time, but he can make that jump the second time because he's already been a little bit corrupt in front of you. This again is how sexual promiscuity happens. If you are a young gentleman, such as Muhammad here, and you're dating a young woman, I won't use any examples, we have a few women in here, and you manage to get her to kiss you, eventually you try and get her to let you do a little bit more. And this is the foot in the door phenomenon. And you are obviously trying to get somewhere that she wasn't planning on letting you arrive at until she gets married to you. And we'll leave that at that. So the role of a person in that is a set of expectations about a social position. And this role defines how those in the position ought to behave. So you have a conception of what a policeman should do, and your interaction with that policeman is governed by social thought and will help you understand how you're supposed to interact with that person if they turn out to be a corrupt policeman. Well, in Albania, perhaps that would be less of a surprise. In my country, it would be very surprising to find a policeman who's very upfront about the fact that he's corrupt. So we'll skip over Fiona now. We've done her already. On to social influence. Social influence, two of the factors involve conformity and normative social influence. Conformity is adjusting one's behavior or thinking to coincide with a group standard. Okay, we can think of this in terms of little children. A lot of us are just finishing our developmental psychology course. When you go to school, you have pressure to conform. However you behave at home, however your family treats you, you eventually start acting more or less like everyone else in the classroom. And normative social influence is the influence resulting from a person's desire to gain approval or avoid disapproval. This again, we can call this being part of the classroom. When you're young and you're part of a school, you all want to be good at sports. You all want to be seen as normal. Everyone knows that they're special and they're different, but nobody wants to be very different. You have to kind of be like everyone else, otherwise you're considered strange. And this continues into adult life. There's certain behavior in the workplace that is not acceptable, not because it causes you not to do your work, but because it is so strange that it slows other people down from doing their work. This has happened to me before. I sometimes do strange things, surprise. Social influence, some individuals resist social coercion. This is a picture from Tiananmen Square, which I believe is all the way back in 1989 now. Individual standing up to these tanks. We could obviously use some images from the Arab Spring a year ago and going into last summer of people standing up to social coercion. In this case, the social force is the power of the state. This would be the power of the government. They don't have to use the army. Obviously, they use laws to make people do certain things, and then they can say you're a criminal. You folks who are from Albania, you know enough about communist times to know how easily the state can do these things. That would be a form of social influence. Social relations, again, this is how social pressures and our own beliefs influence us into how we act towards others. One of these being prejudice, an unjustifiable and usually negative attitude towards a group and its members. Okay, prejudice doesn't have to be negative, but it usually is. We usually think people who are not like us. We generally associate prejudice with hate, but it can also be something like thinking of black people, of African Americans, or people of the African diaspora as being great athletes or great dancers, and that would be a form of prejudice, because that's certainly not true of everyone who's African American or of the African diaspora. And that leads us into stereotypes, stereotype beliefs, negative feelings, and a predisposition towards discriminatory action. This is, again, saying something where you believe that one group is exactly this, and the example that we have in Albania is gypsies, or the Roma, which most of you barely even notice. I notice them because they're different from Albanians. Most of you have very negative beliefs about the gypsies who are around here, that they're all thieves or they're all bad. I don't have any problems with them, but then again, I wasn't raised around here. So, social relations, does perception change with race? What we have here is a picture of Queen Elizabeth, who's been made to look as if she were of African origin. It's obviously still recognizable as the Queen, but do we respect her as the Queen? I don't know that I respect anyone who's a